The Shooting Range. In this episode, Pages of History, John Dundas's last fight. Round study, Shturm-S missile quads. And metal beasts, President's Spitfire. Today's Metal Beasts features a legendary fighter, the Spitfire LF Mk.IX, which is also one of the first Israeli tech tree machines. You'll find that it sports the livery of Eliezer Weizmann's personal plane. He was a World War II veteran pilot who later became President of Israel. Let's get a closer look at this Air Force One. This fighter's power plant is an inline 12-cylinder engine. The fuel tanks are found under the cockpit. The aircraft has steel sheets and bulletproof glass for improved survivability, as well as two large-caliber Browning machine guns and two 20mm autocannons for fixed armament. The fighter can also carry bombs and rockets. Spitfire Mk.IX models share a lot of similarities among various tech trees. All of them have amazing climb rates, good maneuverability, and decent speed. New pilots will find it comfortable, while experienced pilots may turn it into a fearsome tool of war. After you take off, set the climb angle steep enough to keep your speed at around 260 km per hour. You can head off towards the enemy right away. The earlier you meet them, the better your altitude advantage. As soon as you get your first contact, level the machine and speed up. Target priority is pretty standard for the Spitfire. The higher the enemy, the more dangerous they are, which means they should be dealt with earlier. Try to avoid frontal attacks. You do have enough firepower, but gun placement and the overall layout aren't the best for this kind of fighting. Our recommendation is to engage enemies in dogfights at every opportunity. The Spitfire can outturn basically any plane except for the Japanese Zero. A straight-line escape is the best tactic against them in any plane. You might also enjoy the efficient rudder, extra useful when you need to turn to your enemy after a climbing spiral, and flaps that increase your maneuverability even further. There's one important thing to know about them. If you need to make a sharper turn, don't engage them fully, because the ram air flow may rip them off. Keep them half open by quickly pressing the button as if you want to engage and disengage them repeatedly. This advice stands true for all Spitfire Mk.IX models. The Israeli version is different from others in its set of suspended armament available. This machine has a couple of 250-pound bombs and 16 HE rockets. Even a heavy tank can't handle these bombs, and your flight performance allows for very close, high-accuracy bombings. The rockets are unlikely to score you some one-hitters, but critical damage can be expected pretty often. And you've got 16 launches. That's a lot of critical damage. It was the 28th of November 1940. Royal Air Force Squadrons 152 and 609 were getting ready for a scrambled takeoff. Europe had already submerged into darkness, and Great Britain was alone against the Nazis. The dark Atlantic waters were full of German destroyers and U-boats, while the kingdom was constantly tormented by black-crested aircraft. They were better than the British ones and came in much larger numbers, so the exhausted pilots in those Spitfires had little hope left. The fighters took off, gained altitude, and flew away. John Dundas, a young journalist who volunteered for the Air Force, was staring hard into the skies ahead. At 25 years old, he was the most experienced pilot in 609 Squadron. He'd spent a year in the war, losing friends every day, but survived himself and took 12 German planes down. The fighters were approaching the Isle of Wight. But what was that? All of a sudden, a furious air fight began. The German fighters they'd been looking for turned out to be flying higher, and of course, they employed their favorite tactic, diving against the sun. The brave French pilot Paul Bayon was the first to lose that fight. He was shot down by Mk.IX, the best Luftwaffe ace pilot of the time. Just spotting him in the sky stroked terror, and now scoring his first British plane in that dive, he continued his attack instead of going up. What could those greener-than-grass rookie replacements do against him? But he didn't know that John Dundas was there. We'll never know what the thoughts of the young British pilot were in that endless moment. He probably recognized Vic's plane or his piloting style. That was him. That's the terrifying German ace. Bringing him down would mean delivering a devastating blow to the Nazi ego. It would mean making them feel scared, defeating all of their tall tales about how they were superior in technology, ideology, and race. Then there was a dodge, a wing turn, and a chase after the 109. So what if Dundas himself was now chased by Vic's wingman, Rudolf Fanz? So what if the pilots of other Spitfires were shouting, "Scramble, Johnny, there's a Jerry on your 6"? He had to take down that enemy. He had to take down that flying idol on his painted plane. Vic's wingman was a split second late. John Dundas' 8 Brownings demolished the famed German ace's fighter and sent it spinning into the English Channel. But his own fighter exploded only a couple of seconds later. The Emil's 2 cannons tore it apart with ease. It was a loss for the Royal Air Force, but unfortunately only one of many in that war. For the Luftwaffe, however, losing Vic was a heavy blow. The wingmen saw Mk.IX bail out, so they sent everyone they could to the rescue. It was all in vain. All those Kriegsmarine torpedo boats and trawlers lost to English ships and mines in the English Channel brought no result. The rescue float planes exposing their sides looking for him, all in vain. The Germans were so devastated they even asked Great Britain directly, "Maybe they taken him prisoner?" No, they hadn't, mate. Wick didn't survive, did he? And the one who shot his plane was one of those stiff upper lip refined Tommies who sacrificed his life without a thought. Maybe that's when the brainwashed Nazis got the cold thought that the British had no intention of surrendering. In today's round study, we're going to talk about an unusual machine, the self-propelled anti-tank missile carrier Shturm-S. Its arsenal includes no less than 4 different ATGMs. Let's try to find out their differences and uses. The first missile you get as soon as you unlock the vehicle is the simplest one, the 9M114. With 560 millimeters of penetration, it's more than enough for most enemies. Moreover, the missile has an explosive mass of almost 4 kilograms in TNT equivalent. In practice, it means that some tanks might be destroyed with the volumetric effect rather than a direct hit. For instance, here's the Swedish IKV 91105 light tank. The missile hit its track, but the explosion was so strong it got through the hull and destroyed the whole machine. The effect was so powerful it could even damage heavier tanks like the British Chieftain. Only tanks with reactive armor, like the American M60A1 Rise, 1 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 Alternatively, you could simply choose another missile, the Mk.IX with a tandem warhead. The first charge detonates reactive armor, while the second one penetrates up to 800 millimeters of main armor with no effort. This missile also carries even more explosives, up to 4.5 kilograms in TNT equivalent. The Shturm-S can destroy any target at its BR by hitting it in any spot. No steel or ERA can help against it. Now, the third ATGM you have here is the Mk.IX-120F1 with an HE warhead. This missile carries a mighty punch, almost 7 kilograms of TNT equivalent, more than the famous KV-2's shell. All this raw strength helps breach the roofs of those tanks that are invincible to other missiles. Or when your enemy is hiding behind a hill, peek out enough to see something poking above their turret, and that's enough. Your hull will stay hidden while the enemy gets a gentle pat on the head and sees the hangar screen. The last ATGM you can use here can turn this machine into a true SAM. The 9M220O is a similar HE missile that received a timed fuse in exchange for some payload. It's just as effective against ground targets, but can also frustrate some enemy pilots. It has a fuse with a 4-meter radius, a flight range of 7 kilometers, and most importantly, a surprise effect. Pilots don't usually expect anti-air missiles at the BR of 8.3. Summing up, you'll find the 9M114 useful when upgrading the vehicle before you unlock the 9M120. The tandem missile will become your main weapon, filling most of the racks. The HE might only be used in a few cases, but we still recommend you take a few just in case. The proximity fuse missile is an amazing defense tool against enemy air, both for you and your teammates. Well, it's time to answer some of the questions you ask us in the comments. The first question was sent by a player called Chaos David 44. What is the best round for the Soviet T-10A? Hi David, we recommend that you use the BR-471B since it's more efficient against sloped armor. If you expect to encounter some heavies, you can also take a couple of APCBC shells, modification D. By the way, we made a detailed comparison of these rounds in episode number 246. Check it out. Ben Killer Hun asks, can you give me tips for the A4E early? Hello, Ben Killer. Try to avoid unnecessary turns in air battles. The A4E can do that pretty well, but getting back to speed might be tricky. In mixed battles, enjoy the whole potential of bullpup missiles. You can use them as regular rockets, but long-range manual guidance makes attacking enemy anti-air vehicles way easier. Another question comes from Brigadier Beetle. Where do I find the manual engine control keybinds and how to properly use them? Hi Beetle. It's too big of a topic to discuss here, but fortunately, we had a whole section about it in a previous episode. Look for number 223 and have a nice watch. Karthik S.A. writes, why do some German planes have fuel gauges in the engine itself rather than in the cockpit? If they are in the engine, how can they see them accurately? Why is it there and not in the cockpit? Hi there. You're probably talking about the HS-129. Its cockpit was so cramped that engineers had to remove anything but the navigation panels and pilot controls. The engine gauges were placed on the walls of the engine nacelles where the pilot could see them. And the last comment for today was written by Georg Frenzel. Is it possible to destroy a flying boat like the BV-238 in the water with a torpedo or a sea mine? Hello. Why don't we test it? Here's a torpedo going straight for the plane's nose. A few hundred kilos of explosives have a predictable result. Let's take another flying boat, have it land on the surface, and direct it at a mine. Boom! No boat, no mine. Tell us if you managed to pull it off in battle. Unbelievably, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. You have to subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. All of them are really worth watching, believe me. Remember, kids, battles are only enjoyable in a game. Don't forget to leave a like because we believe you do. And please share your thoughts and comments, and see you next week.